Hey, and welcome to Things Worth Learning. I'm your host, Matt Stauffer. This is a show where a curious computer programmer, that's me, interviews fascinating people about their passions. And my guest today is my dear and old friend, Greg Baugues, who served on the developer network team or developer evangelism team at Twilio for the past 8 years. Greg, would you mind telling the audience a little bit about yourself, whether it's your personal or your professional life?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me here. Super excited to do this. So my name's Greg. I have worked on Twilio's developer, we call it the developer network, but other folks might know it as developer relations, developer evangelism team for the last 8 years. My wife, 2 daughters, dog, and I live in Brooklyn. And I'm like a programmer, by trade, and I've been coding most of my life. And then moved into developer relations, which, involves like speaking and writing and communicating and storytelling. I think is the best way to think about it. And then, that's it.
You're also an artist and a writer. We'll talk about photography more, I know, but like your writing. So if anybody doesn't know, go check out the show notes, and we'll have a link to Greg's website there. Greg has made the most compelling pitch for Chicago I've ever read in my entire life. And then a little bit later moved to New York and made the most compelling pitch for New York I've ever read in my entire life. So incredible writer, amazing artist. And I hope you don't mind this, but can I share about how we met originally?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that Greg did in the past, I think you may have been at Twilio at this point, was go tour around all the major tech conferences speaking about mental health. Yeah. And it was the first time I'd ever in my life heard a talk about mental health, and it gave me the space and many, many, many other people to go examine my own depression and anxiety in that, and to actually talk to a therapist about it and get medication. And when I first heard him speak in New York at Laracon years and years and years ago, I just introduced myself afterwards, and we've been friends since. But that impact that Greg has made, I think, can't be understated in terms of just like, I know that's not all you do today, right? Like, so you're not just like the mental health guy, but the amount of people who have referenced those talks as a huge part in their healing journey, especially as I now talk about mental health, a lot of people are like, oh man, Greg Baugues, I heard him at PyCon, or I heard him at whatever else, is always just going to be like, so I just want everybody to hear like the amazing impact this man, who we're going to hear talk about something completely unrelated, has had on the lives of so many programmers. So thank you, Greg.
I really appreciate that. Thanks for saying that. So just for context for folks, like I'm a developer, I have bipolar and ADHD. If y'all want to hear the long version of that story, you can Google me.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. There's, but so like, I mean, I started meds for both those things, probably, what was it, like 2008, and life just sort of steadily got better. And I think like I'm like just like naturally curious about stuff, and then when something works for me, I just like want to tell other people. And that
totally.
Probably the Chicago Post you referenced, and the New York Post, or like even just with mental health, it's like, oh my God, I was suffering, and then like once I could get past the denial, like I started taking a pill every morning, and my quality of life improved by like 10x, and I could like keep commitments and stuff. So I do appreciate you saying that, because I spoke about that stuff for 7-8 years. It's part of the thing that led me into developer evangelism, and I've kind of like done less of it over the last year. I just sort of got one, I got burned out on it, but 2, there's so many more people talking about it today than there were 8 years ago, that it feels a little bit less necessary for me to be out there doing it. But that said, it is like really great to hear and be reminded that it actually like helped some folks. And I very much appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. And just one last note about that. Among the people who have told me how impactful it has been, many of them are people who are now speaking about mental health.
That's so cool.
You did a lot. So,
thank you.
Right. So switching on to the actual normal topics of the conversation, the first question that I always ask is, do you have any sort of life mantra or phrase or idea that you try to live your life by?
Yeah. So I think over the last few years, it has been progress over perfection.
Love it.
This is sort of tied in, I think, to some of the stuff I learned through the mental health journey. I am, probably like a lot of folks, prone to perfectionism, prone to being afraid of what other people will think about a thing that I make, and getting paralyzed by like the fear of criticism. I have a tendency to get like overwhelmed by the enormity of a task. And what I've just learned works well for me is like just do a little bit and make a little, like just move the ball a little bit. And I'm 42 now, and I think there's a funny thing with age and that when you're young, like when I was in my 20s, I wasn't old enough to have witnessed the effects of like compounding, you know, and then when you get to like your 30s or 40s, you start noticing areas of your life where you moved a little bit in a direction, either good or bad, each week, and then where you ended up after a decade, right? And so like in fitness, it might be like, oh yeah, like I just gained like a pound or two a year, you know, like I was like, oh, surprise, like you're 20 pounds heavier than you were in your 30s, like, and it never felt like a big thing, but here you are, you know. Or like career wise on a positive, you know, or like giving talks, you're like, oh, go speak at one conference. Doesn't seem like, and all of a sudden after a few years, you've spoken at 10 or 20 conferences and something matters. So, you know, I have some between work stuff or, photography we'll talk about here in a second. I think just being able to say like, what can I do today? Like, is there something I can ship today? That will just move the ball just a little bit forward? Is there something I can do in the next 15 minutes? Like, can I write like an imperfect email and press send in 10 minutes instead of like trying to write the perfect email that I'll never send, you know, like, and just making progress over perfection has really helped me. You know, shipping something imperfect is so much better than never shipping something as perfect.
I love that. Yesterday, one of my friends, Michael, shared a TikTok, one of his favorite fitness people, and he's like, the number one problem that people run into is that they're trying to lose 10 kilograms, and what they need to do is lose 1 kilogram and then lose another kilogram. And it was kind of this similar idea. It's like we get so overwhelmed and anxious about the need to do things perfectly. And it's very relevant as programmers because, you know, like most programmers have to learn how to ship incrementally. But as you mentioned, it's relevant in so many other places in our lives. So thank you for that. I love that.
You got it. I gained 15 pounds during the pandemic. I talk about like gaining 10, 20 pounds over the course of a decade, but really like for me, it was like gain 15 pounds over the course of like a year and a half. Yeah. And so I've been trying to lose it, and like, it's discouraging because, you know, like you see it's not steady progress, right? Like it's like one day, like I just weigh myself every morning after I get out of the shower, and like one day it's like up a little bit, down a little bit. But what, I have this app and like the scale is tied to it. But what's encouraging is like when you zoom out from the day to day and you see like the week or the month view, the line actually does take like a downward trend. And then what like I think you have to find is that the range of the fluctuations shifts down if you're making progress, you know? So like on any given day, you're like, oh, it's a bummer, my weight's up. I was like, yeah, but like weight going up today is still, the weight's lower than it was like 3 months ago. And that like taking the longer view is something that, you know, unfortunately is like becomes more and more apparent as you get older, but it's also when you have less and less time to actually affect it. And so
that's good though. I mean, we're so not naturally equipped to take a long view of anything, right? It's this moment, I'm feeling this thing, I'm experiencing this thing. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy therapy and even weight loss programs and structures or fitness routines versus my own stuff is because when it's just me by myself trying to do these push-ups, or it's just, you know, me feeling my feelings in this moment versus somebody else whose job it is to help me kind of look at that long perspective, and maybe they can look at the long perspective because they're not in it every day, and just having another person whose job it is to help me like see the forest for the trees, you know, is very helpful. So
it's huge. Therapy is so helpful.
Oh my God, we could do a whole podcast about that.
We absolutely could. Yeah, maybe we'll do a round 2.
I'll have you back on, man.
All right.
Like at least half of the people here during the interview, I'm like, so there's 3 more things that we clearly need to bring you back on for. So, but today,
it's things plural worth learning, not things worth learning.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. It's just one. Today we're going to do one. So because we know there is one, can you tell me what is the one thing we're actually talking about today?
We're going to talk about photography.
I love it. So I have so many thoughts about this, but I want to give the tiniest intro that your photography, just like so many other things you've done, has inspired me in a way that I think a lot of professional photographers don't, because theirs seems so inaccessible and yours is so beautiful, but also normal in a way. And I hope that's not offensive at all, but it's just like street photographers are not in a studio doing, you know, stuff with models. They're doing stuff that we all see, but they have a different eye for it. So I was really curious to start with a question of just like, what did you getting into this in the first place look like?
Oh man, I love that question. It's a story I love to tell. So,
good.
So I've always, looking back, I've always enjoyed taking pictures. But but I was always like on my phone or on like a point and shoot. And so I've really, it's just been like the last year that I would identify as a photographer. Okay. But I started up an Instagram account like 4 years ago. And the reason I started it was just, I had heard some comment somewhere where someone said, people like talk a lot of shit about, oh, does the world really need another photo sharing app? But Instagram actually, when it first came out, was really important because it made your photos better. And I was like, oh, maybe Instagram will make my photos better. So I started just like taking pictures and playing with the filters and just basically sliding the knobs all the way one side and then all the way the other side and see where in the middle do I think it looks better, and doing that for each one. And I did that for like a year or so. And I'll share like we could probably come back to this, but I have a blog. I blogged for like 10 years. I blog a lot for work. I enjoy writing. Writing takes so much time. Also coding, like I love coding, but you need these long chunks of uninterrupted time to really get into the zone and to ship something that's worthwhile. It takes like hours of effort, and whether it's prose or whether it's code. And I have kids now, and it's just hard to find that time. Yeah. I think I was really drawn to sort of Instagram in part because a photograph is a piece of content that you can create and ship in 5 minutes. And so I would just walk around the city. I live in New York, and there's just, which is like a playground for street photography. Yeah. And so while I was waiting for the train, or while I was just walking down Fifth Avenue on my way to the office, or walking around Brooklyn, I would just take a picture, and then like while I was on the train or wherever, I could just edit it, ship it, and be done. And just like for what it's worth, I keep my Instagram is at Greggy B, but like I keep it private. And so like I made a decision early on, like I'm not trying to chase numbers here. I'm not playing like a hashtag game. Like this is just like where I can ship stuff, and then like friends who I know, like I'll accept their request, right? And then like, but I just want to practice shipping stuff. So I did this for, I don't know, a year or so. And then like very good friend, Doug McKenzie, who's like a world-class magician and a photographer, he reached out to me one day. He's like, hey, I've got something for you. I think you might like it. And so we met up, and he gave me his old Canon 5D Mark II, which,
oh, cool.
Yeah, this is a camera that it's probably about 13, 14 years old now. But when but I've still out in the world met professional photographers who use this as their event photography. It is an amazing camera. It's a DSLR. It had a 24-70 lens on it. And he had upgraded to a mirrorless camera, and this had been sitting on a shelf for a while. And he's like, look, like I know you don't identify as a photographer, but you are a photographer. You're doing really good work.
That's awesome.
And I think you'd enjoy learning how this works. So he gave it to me the day before I took my family to Disney World. I took the thing to Disney World. I have like 4 pictures that I took from a week there that actually worked, because like I had no idea how to work it. And I was like so pissed off at like hauling around this thing. And like none of the shots came. I was like, I should just take them on my phone. But over time I learned how it worked, and I carried that camera with me every day for like a year. And I
would you mind if I pause you real quick? Please. You remember where you are? Yeah. For anybody who doesn't know, a DSLR is like if you think of a traditional like professional photographer, an SLR means the ones where you can take the big chunky lens off, so you can tell that the body's going to be bigger. DSLR means a digital version of that. So we're not talking about a little point and shoot. We're talking about a big old honker hanging around your neck, walking around Disney, right?
Yeah, and specifically the like the SLR stands for, I think, a single lens reflex. So like on the DSLR, there's a mirror inside, and there's this mechanism that causes like if you think the light comes in through the lens, and then it uses a mirror to reflect the image up into the viewfinder. And then when you press the shutter button, there's a mechanism that flips the mirror up, so the light from the lens comes right back into the sensor. And so what that means is 2 things. 1, it's heavy. And 2, it's loud because you hear the flipping. So if you're ever watching like a sports event and you hear that noise where it's like, like right as like the guy swinging or whatever, that's the sound of mirrors flapping, right? And the newer version, which most of the industry is moving to, is a mirrorless, which basically just means like the lens is completely transparent. So you can see the image. So it's like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but it's not. So like, it's like a mirror, but digital camera. But what that means then is like the light's coming in, and instead of a mirror reflecting the light up into the viewfinder, they have an EVF or electric viewfinder, and it's basically just taking whatever is like hitting the sensor and then putting it on a screen. And the big reason why we're able to have mirrorless cameras these days with electronic viewfinders is because we've gotten so good at producing high quality compact displays because of advances in telephones or in iPhones or whatever, so they're basically taking those displays, making them super small, and so that you can just like stick your eye up to it and see.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, so mirrorlesses are quieter and lighter than
usually
DSLRs.
smaller too, right? Because they don't have the same depth that they have to have the lens go in or whatever.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So sorry, back to your story. I just knew that not everyone knew what that meant. So
no, that's great, and I very much appreciate the. It's weird to think this was about 3 years ago, and I definitely now suffer from the curse of knowledge, right? Like and I've learned. So
of course, everybody knows.
Yes. Stop me, please, anytime here, because it's really important to me. So much of this stuff seemed so intimidating to me 3 years ago. So anyway, I carried that camera around. I probably shot like 30,000 frames with it within like the first few months. I started learning how to use Lightroom. And then eventually, I was put onto this camera called a Fuji X100F. And it is also a mirrorless camera. It has internals that are every bit as good, like the sensor and the processor and everything are every bit as good as a professional camera. It is that. But instead of having an interchangeable lens on it, it has a fixed 35 millimeter equivalent lens on it. So, and I say equivalent there because the way the sensor works out and stuff, like it's not actually like a 35 millimeter lens. We don't have to go into all the details there, but it looks like an old school 35 millimeter film camera, and they designed it so it looks it has the same aesthetics as it
feels very nostalgic when you're holding it.
It does. And I bought this camera for $600 off Craigslist, and it was amazing because it went from it's probably a third the size of the Canon 5D Mark II. And there were a few different things with it that were just incredible. Like one is it was super easy to carry around. So these days I've since upgraded to the newer version, which is the X100V, but I literally don't leave the house without it. I got this strap from Peak Design I love. And if I walk the dog, I have it. I don't always take a picture, but it's always there. The other thing about it is when you point a DSLR, or not a DSLR, when you point a big long lens at somebody, they know. Like, and they're kind of like, are you the paparazzi? Like, what? Are you selling these images? What are you doing? This camera is so cute and unassuming, and people underestimate it somewhat. I've heard it described before as like bringing a camera like that. Using a camera like that is sometimes like bringing a cannon to a knife fight. And I'd say like bringing the Fuji X100V feels like a knife for a knife fight. Like you can get in close, you can kind of bring it in and out, and then it's also silent. And so I don't, I never want to take a picture of someone who doesn't want me to take their picture, right? And I absolutely never want to share a picture of someone who doesn't want me to share their picture. But that said, it is also nice to be at like a friend's party or something and be unobtrusive, and to know that they will appreciate having great moments of that captured, but for people to have their guards down while you're walking around taking pictures.
And you're not like changing the experience of the party by being like paparazzi around the whole thing. Yeah, totally.
I would, we could talk more about this, but like in most cases, I would prefer to be invisible, and I would certainly prefer the camera to be invisible. The Fuji X100V feels like as close to invisible as you can kind of get.
Yeah. You got me hooked because I don't even remember the first moment, but you had shown me some of your work, and I also carried around not a 5D Mark II, but like a Canon 20D or something like that. And it was another one of those big old chunky ones. And I would love the outcome of the photos I would get from my kids from that, but the experience of carrying it around when I'm out with a family or something like that, it's very much what, I wasn't doing street photography, but even family photography, it just feels like I was not present when I'm sitting here with get my focal lens right and everything. It just was this ridiculous situation. And you shared that with me, and I got the same strap as you and everything. I was like, I'm going to do it. He does it. And it's so funny because you are able to notice pictures I've taken, you're like, that picture was with the Fuji, wasn't it? And I was like, yeah, because no matter how good these iPhone lenses get, and they're pretty freaking good right now, there's just things that you can do that are a little bit different. And rather than me trying to name them, if someone else were in your situation and, you got a couple kids, you want to just take casual pictures, or you live in a beautiful city, can you give me the pitch for what makes my pictures that I took with that noticeable to you relative to my pictures I took with my iPhone? Like, what are we getting from this experience?
I would actually say let's back up from there. Let's not even talk about the pictures. Let's talk about the fact I have ADD. All right.
Me too.
And so I think the most accurate description of my camera that I share with folks is I tell people it's my fidget toy. My daughter has like this little fidget spinner, right? And for me, like, if you're geeky, there's no video with this, right? It's just audio. Oh, there is. Okay, so folks will see. Oh, okay, cool. So
some people are listening, some people are watching. Great, so for those who are only listening, go check out the YouTube.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So here's the camera that I carry with me all the time. For the folks just listening, let's see if you can hear this. I don't know.
Yeah, you can hear it.
Okay, you can hear it. All right, and then let's listen to this. All right. So
that's a fidget spinner.
So it's got 3 beautiful mechanical knobs on it. The screen pops out in the back.
Yes, I love that.
Articulates. So, here's kind of like one aha moment for me when I first started carrying the 5D. So I had it on me, and our daughter at the time was 5. And we got invited to a friend's birthday party at a Taekwondo studio. And the Taekwondo studio, most martial arts studios in New York, they have to optimize for mat space. So there's a very little strip of no mat up front.
Yeah.
Most of the space is mat. And the kids had their socks off. They're all playing on the mats. All the adults were crowded in the tight little cramped space in this loud room, trying to make small talk, eating, pizza and drinking wine or whatever. And I like people, but I prefer one-on-one. With ADD, I think one of the best explanations of it is like the opposite of happiness is not sadness, but boredom. I just like doing stuff, I'm unhappy when I have to. So I'm kind of like looking around, and I'm like, I just kind of like slipped my shoes off, and I pulled out my camera, and I went on the mat, and I just spent like the next 2 hours just taking pictures of the kids. Yeah. And it was great. The whole time is this challenge of like, oh man, like, they're going down the slide. Like, where can I sit to get like a good shot of them going to, like, okay, what settings do I have to do to track a moving target? Like, what light, how do I deal with these fluorescent lights? And then the birthday cake came out, and I was like, oh man, like, how do I change a setting? Like, we only have candlelight here. And like, where can I put the camera to capture the moment of him blowing out the candles? But how do I do that without like not pushing all the kids out of the way and stuff, and then, when it was over, the next day I sent the parents the pictures, and they were so grateful. Like, it's the pictures are undeniably better than what you get. iPhones are great, like absolutely great. And like, and there are definitely settings. There are definitely situations and settings where it's absolutely sufficient. But like in low light or action shots or whatnot, or, you can be more artistic oftentimes. They were just very, very thankful. And so what I realized with carrying around an external camera is it just it gives me something to do no matter where I am. Like when I actually do a lot of photography for work. It's not part of my job, but we would put on these events for developers. And I would organize the events, but then when people were working and stuff, I would just walk around and take pictures because like it just keeps me moving. Like and it gives me something to do, and then it gives me this unique gift that I can give people that is a higher quality than what they've probably captured on their own, and they're probably not being super intentional about capturing photos in a lot of situations. So, if nothing else, it just gives me something to do and another skill to learn, and it's just this constant exercise in problem solving of. We can talk about like exposure settings and stuff, but like there are a number of different like photography with an external camera. I don't want to call it like a real camera. I'm not sure actually what the right phrase is, but like with a dedicated camera, let's say, is a constant exercise in managing trade-offs, and juggling constraints and working under tight deadlines. Cause you're going to miss the moment. Like the moments that it's not landscape. I'm not as drawn to landscape photography. Like I want to capture a moment. Like I want to capture the split second of the kid blowing out the birthday candle. Right. And that's the stuff that's interesting to me. And because it just speaks to the ADD parts of my brain.
I had never thought about it. It's so funny because you're saying that, and I'm like looking at my fidget spinner here, and I'm like, I have that exact same. It's not as loud as it, but let's see. Yeah, this one isn't loud, but yet it's the same. It's spinners just like you're talking about, and but it's so interesting to think about it not just as something that produces a particular outcome, but something that gives you a particular experience. And even when I thought you were going to talk about experience, I still thought it was going to be about the experience of your interaction with the subject or something like that, versus how it affects you and your brain. It is really cool. And it does make me want to ask the question, though, of do you feel like, because I think a lot of people are really scared of, as parents, but also just as participants in life, of doing things that keep us from being in the moment.
Yeah.
So the way you described that almost made it sound like you feel like you're more in the moment than less. Could you talk about that a little?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mean, two thoughts on that. One, I do think it does keep me more in the moment. I think that just as I've gotten older, I just learn more about how my brain works, and my brain just craves stimulation. And if I'm in an environment and my brain's not like, I was never good at like sitting through like college lectures or whatever, if I'm in an environment and my brain's not getting stimulation, it will find other things to do. And so photography often gives me something to do where, like to some extent, like I don't want to to some extent, I'm more in the moment than most people in the room. Cause like, let's just say, for instance, like at a friend's birthday party or something, like I'm looking at like a mass of kids moving and I'm like trying to predict where they're going to be in 15 seconds. And like, I'm like, cause I want to like figure out like who's going to be laughing and like, where are they going to be laughing? And I'm looking like, where's the light? So like, where do I need to stand? So the light's behind me, but like hitting their face. And, now maybe like there's absolutely times when I've been like in a room photographing and then someone asks me a question. I'm like, I have no idea what anybody just said, So like, I don't want to pretend like, so there's that. The other thing, like, I don't know, it's everyone, man, but like I said, I'm 42, I'm firmly middle-aged now. I just feel like my memory gets worse every year. And, I have, my screensaver is pictures, like some of my favorite pictures I've taken, and I've got like printouts that I've printed off like all around my office and stuff. And it really has been useful for me to like remember stuff and like prompt memories, and like I'll see a picture, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember a lot more from there. But there is something just about preserving memories that I think I only appreciate after a year or two has gone by when I've taken some of these pictures that I'm really thankful for.
So this is taking me a direction that I wasn't expecting to, but I was about to say, and you probably take less pictures than we do with iPhones, because iPhones, a moment happened and I have 100. I'm like, no, you probably have 1,000 after a moment. So there's nothing about the number of them, but I wonder whether there's a process of curation after the fact that we don't normally do with our iPhones. Could you talk a little bit about like, and imagine maybe it's possible that some of this curation could be things we do with, regardless of what we're shooting with. Like, what does your curation process after the fact look like?
It is such a great question. And, I'm glad you asked. At some point I should, write a blog post about this, but
I'd love that.
I think this is going to be personal to every photographer. I think one thing you'll find that anyone who has carried a dedicated camera struggles with, and professional photographers struggle with, is the editing cue guilt. And it's really easy to build up a backlog and then to not clear it and then not take more pictures because you don't want to add to the backlog. And I think that is something that discourages a lot of folks. And that is truthfully one of the great parts about an iPhone is you shoot the picture, it's there, you can share it right then and there. And one of the kind of technical challenges I've been thinking a lot about lately is how can I get pictures from my camera to the person that I want to give it to faster. But all right, so let me talk a little bit about my editing cue. So one, just personal philosophy. I think it's the photographer's job to curate their images. So a personal pet peeve of mine is when someone gives me photos and they give me like 50 photos and it's really just 5 scenes, but it's 10 pictures for each scene. I'm like, I feel like it's my responsibility not to waste people's time. Again, I have short attention span. I assume everybody else does. Show me the best image that represents the scene and then go to the next one. So that's my goal. If I give someone a photo album, and a big portion of what is important to me about my photography is, again, I'm not trying to chase likes on Instagram. Like I kind of decided early on, I'm not going to let that, I just know that's an empty, endless game. But what I really do enjoy is giving a Google photo album of 20 pictures to the parents of the kid who just had the birthday party, or I just recently did headshots for people at work for the first time, and like giving one awesome picture to somebody that they can use on their dating app or their LinkedIn profile or whatever, like has been meaningful. So I enjoy that. So how do I get there? End result is a Google photo album that has some selected images. I'm looking at my Lightroom right now. I have 103,000 photos in Lightroom from the time that Doug gave me the camera. Now, truthfully, the real number of frames shot is probably 5x that. I use Lightroom for my editing. I use Lightroom Creative Cloud Edition. It's just called Lightroom now. It has cloud storage. I use that because I like editing photos on my iPhone and my iPad in bed.
Oh, okay.
And this syncs. But you do pay per terabyte. And I very quickly realized that if I didn't do a curation prior to hitting Lightroom, that I was going to just be paying for a lot of shitty photos that I never wanted to see again. So a friend who shoots a lot of events at Twilio, and this is another great part about this hobby for me, is I've had the opportunity through work events to learn from actual professionals. Yeah. And my friend Jerry showed me one day, he had this app on his iPad or on his MacBook called Photo Mechanic. Photo Mechanic was built by photojournalists who do high volume photography and needed to very quickly cull their images and then send them off to an editor so they could publish them in the paper right away.
Got it.
So it rips from the SD card like 4 or 5 times faster than Lightroom does. Lightroom's actually really slow at moving stuff over. Yeah. And I do my first pass in Photo Mechanic. Basically what my first pass is, I'm just looking for photos that are in frame and in focus. So, and then I add to that, like if I'm shooting people, which most of my shots that I like the most are pictures of people. Just like with Greg, like if their eyes are closed, I don't want it. Like I want to see their eyes. I want to see their faces. Right. Yeah. So I'm just going through, I'm looking, I'm not saying is this good or whatnot. I'm just saying, is this picture at all possibly usable? So I mark that. Typically I throw away 80% right off the gate. So then I have my, I start with what I call my ingested photos. That's everything that was ingested from the SD card. I copy the keepers to a file to Lightroom. And then I import everything into Lightroom, and then I do my edits from there. And basically my process is I'll then go through, typically what you'll end up with is like 3 or 4 shots from the same sequence. And I'm typically looking for like the best one of those. And so I'll mark those as like 3 stars. And then I'll go back through after I've done that pass and I've got my 1 or 2 photos of each sequence. Then I'll actually do the edits. Once the edit is done, I mark it as 4 stars and I export that. Everything then goes to Google Photos. And then after time has passed, like typically a month or more, just periodically I go back, and my favorite images with the benefit of time, I end up marketing as 5 stars. And those are the ones that like go to like the screensaver or whatever. Or just, I might print one day or something. So there, I say that to say in part, I use like figuring out the process, again, the ADD thing, like figuring out the process, figuring out how I keep making progress has been a huge challenge for me. And I use the stars to indicate where in the process it is, not the quality
how
of the
good
photo.
it is. Yeah. That's cool. And you said well, we can talk about aperture later, but the thing is, there's so many tutorials on the internet to teach somebody about aperture. I don't need you to teach us about that, right? Like, let's go to YouTube for that. I love this. I love hearing about how it impacts your life, what you do to kind of make it make sense for you. And I think that the majority of people listening to this who will be interested are not professional photographers. Otherwise, they'll be like, cool, that's fine. So it's those of us who take photos with a desire to do a little bit more of what you're doing, whether it's capture the place around you a little bit more, capture your friends and family a little bit more. So in that direction, I know we don't have a ton of time left. I wanted to ask you if you were to recommend somebody to move in the direction from being, I take pictures of my kids on my iPhone. Afterwards, I edit them and I maybe bump up the contrast or do a little bit of curves editing or whatever, and then text it out to my family or put it on Instagram. If they wanted to take a next step, what do you think the next step is for that person?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, I think the external camera has been great. There's a saying, the best camera is the one you have on you. And
yes, yeah.
Most folks use that to say, like, shoot with the iPhone, right? And I think there's a lot of value in that. I think another way you could interpret that is the best camera you could buy is one that you'll actually carry with you every day. And so in that case, I can't really stop singing the praises of the Fuji X100 series. There's also the Ricoh. I haven't owned this, but the one that always comes up in conversation is, I think, the Ricoh 3 GH or something like that. But if you look for Ricoh GH, we can find it in the show notes. It's also small and compact, but I think any camera plus strap that you will, that just makes it easy for it to always be there. I carry my camera every day. I don't always take pictures with it, but it's always there. And then, you just start tinkering with it and playing with it. And I'll just say too, for the developers out there, this hobby's been great for me in part that it has like this really nice like merge of mechanical stuff with the camera, but also there's a software component with Lightroom and what does your storage process look like? What does your sharing process look like? And there's just kind of like a fun little, like it strikes a lot of the same stuff while also being a piece of content that you can start and ship in 5 minutes. And so
that's cool. And one of the things I love about the Fuji is that it doesn't just look nostalgic. It feels very nostalgic in a really impressive way where, like, when I'm using it, it reminds me of, like, I've got an old camera I got from, I think, one of my grandfathers or something. And it feels the same as those do, even those are 50 years old or whatever. So there's something not just fidget spinnery, but also, like, feeling like you're connected to, like, for those who don't know, a lot of programmers take up like woodworking and stuff. They're like, I sit in the computer all day long. I'm going to do something real with my hands. And I love that you pointed this out. Working with this particular camera feels very much real with my hands, even though I know it's digital. It doesn't feel digital when I'm using it.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I mean, when people stop me on the street, which happens fairly often, to ask about this camera, they're like, oh, I haven't seen a camera like that in a long time. And I'm like, yeah, from the front and from the top, it looks like it's a camera from that your grandpa had in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
But then I show them the screen in the back. And so you really do have, like, the input mechanisms are very mechanical. But then you get all the benefit of software photography.
I love that. As always, there's 10,000 more things that I want to ask you about, and we're really short on time. So before I ask you my last question, is there any other kind of like pieces of this topic that you really wanted people to kind of get a chance to hear about?
I think I would just say, I mean, the last bit that's just been interesting to me, again, is it's like photographs seem to make good gifts. Because like most folks can buy anything they actually want on Amazon and have it like a day later. So it's hard to do that. But capturing a moment or capturing, or like just even like saying, hey, I see you, and then giving them that, even if it's digitally, has been surprising, how gratifying, that's been.
Really cool.
So I've started printing off stuff, and I got this Canon. It's called a selfie printer from Canon, but it prints off 4x6s. So I can print my own, and then I'll buy like really cheap, like $4 frames from Amazon, and just throw like a 4x6 that I print myself into a frame. This gift cost me like $5 or whatever, and give it to people. And they've been really appreciative. Fuji also makes an Instax camera that prints off what we would typically just call Polaroids. And I'll give those to folks, and I've been surprised. And like the image quality is not necessarily great.
Yeah, the Instax camera is not that great, but it's fun, right?
It's fun, yeah. And people like oh, like I'll see them. They're like, oh, I still have that picture that you gave me. Like, and I'm like,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So, that part's been really interesting. That if you develop the skill, you figure out how to do the process and stuff. It is a actual unique gift that you can give people to kind of like validate them. In a way.
I love that. I don't know if you've seen these, but it reminds me there's a few people who on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, they they're sitting on a subway. Usually you imagine it's New York, and they're like showing a person, and then they, within the span of just a subway ride, draw the person, hand it to the person, and their face is always like, me, you did, you, with it, you know, and it feels really similar to that. Like you're like paying attention. I love the way that you said, I see you. Like you're making them feel seen and understood. And if it's a good photo, it's not just a photo of them, it's a photo of them laughing or having a good time, or there's something that captures who they are, right? And so they feel even more seen as a result of not you just paying attention to them, but really like seeing who they are.
Yeah.
God, that gave me goosebumps when you said that. I really love that idea.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate it.
I don't want to end, but we need to. So what insight or support did you either receive or need when you were younger that you hope people will give to others?
Insight or support? How many minutes do we have? Can I, how short do I need to keep this answer?
You know what? Take as long as you want, and I'm going to push my next meeting back because I want to hear it.
All right. Yeah. So So I think, two things. So one, just this, idea that like there's a whole lot of different paths to, in air quotes, success. And yours may look different from other folks. And so and then more tactical on that, something that's been really important to me in my career, and then with this photography thing too, is this idea of overlapping skill sets. So, let's just talk about development, right? Like you want to make a name for yourself in the world of technology, right? Like one way to do that is become in the top 1% of computer programmers. Right. That takes a ton of time, like a ton of effort. Like you have to be pretty focused on the thing. For me with ADD, that probably wasn't going to happen. But I became a good or competent programmer. But then I also got good at public speaking. I also got good at writing. I also, over the years have gotten most few years have gotten good at photography. And so developer evangelism has been an incredible career for me. And the way I typically put it is like, I'm like 50th percentile developer against like all the, like maybe, and that is probably like maybe once upon a time I was like, not anymore. And like, maybe I'm like 70th percentile, like public speaker, but nowhere near as good as like a stand-up comedian or a pastor or something. Right. But I'm better at public speaking than like 95% of developers, and I'm better at developing than like 99.9% of software developers. So like I'm really good at giving talks to a developer conference, right? Compared to the competition.
That's great.
And similar for photography, like I've used my photography a lot at work. So as an example, like I do these events. After we do events, we would typically send out a report internally, and we'd say like, here's how many people came and here's kind of the results and stuff. And like so many of these reports come out, nobody reads them because they're like boring, but you send the report because you feel like you have to. I just started like TLDR, like 50 people at the thing. We did this. Here's 20 pictures.
The photos. Yes, I love this.
And it's like all these pictures of like developers like laughing, and like a developer wearing a shirt from our customer standing next to a picture of one of our people wearing a Twilio shirt, and like these reports like blew up, and like we got like our small team of like 2 or 3 people got outsized recognition because the reports were good, and
I love that.
So similarly, my other hobby, which we haven't talked about, is jujitsu.
BJJ, yeah.
And I am like, I'll never really be good at jujitsu, but I feel like I have a chance at being a good jujitsu photographer. And I think like that can be my contribution to that community. And I say that as someone who like, I feel confident in my photography, but there are professional photographers who like, whose work just completely eclipses like I will never be at that skill level. But there's not a lot of those folks doing jujitsu. And so I'd say that to like just younger me or anyone else in that spot is like, you need to get good at stuff. You got to put in the hours, you got to develop a skill. But oftentimes you can create a much more interesting career for yourself if you focus on like, what is the intersection of the things that you're really interested in that like makes you uniquely qualified to do this work.
I love that. And I mean, there's so many examples of my own life. I only name one, in part because it was a bit inspired by you, but like I taught about empathy for a while, and I was the guy who taught about empathy in the engineering world. But like outside of the engineering world, I was learning from the people who are actually studying that, who actually have degrees in that, who actually, and I've never compared to them, but I was able to contextualize something. So it's not even just the overlap, it's also the way that the overlap allows you to do something that that professional may not, because they may not know BJJ in the same way you do, right? And then maybe that's not the case always, but sometimes you both have an overlap, and then also I don't want to use the word syncretism, but like your overlap allows you to do something that even somebody technically more talented than you wouldn't be able to do to the same degree because they don't have that same knowledge of the space that you do. So that's a really, really cool idea. And I like that a lot.
Awesome.
I don't want to stop talking, but it's okay. If people think you're amazing, which I'm sure they do, how do they follow and support you? So I understand that your Instagram is private, but let's talk about other places.
I'm Greggy B on Instagram. Follow me. I'll approve you if it looks like you're not trying to get me to buy Bitcoin. That's fine.
Cool. All right, there we go.
No, I just try to make sure it's like real people. But yeah, I'm Greggy B on Instagram. My blog is Baugues, BAUGUES.com, my last name. And I have a newsletter you can subscribe to on there, and I send out posts like once or twice a month on there. That's
full of photos.
Yeah, it's like a mix of photography and prose. But those are the two best spots.
And all of this will be in the show notes. So anything he's talked about, any links that we've had, we'll put all in the show notes. So go check it out. Greg, I cannot thank you enough for your time, for your wisdom, and of course your influence on me and the rest of the community over the years. But just from the photography perspective, thank you for teaching us. Like, I'm inspired to go spend more time with my camera right now and to go start using Lightroom. So thank you so much.
Awesome, man. Well, let me know if you got any questions. Happy to show you what's worked for me, and would love to chat more soon.
I love it. To the rest of you all, thanks for hanging out. And until next time, be good to each other.
See y'all. Thank you.